Welcome to Authors on the Air. I'm your host, Millie Naylor Hast, and I'm delighted to welcome my guest, the acclaimed author Sonya Lalli, who writes as S.C. Lalli in her current novel, her debut thriller, You Sara? Welcome, Sonya.
Hi, Millie. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, this book grabbed me right from the beginning as these two young women, each taking the wrong rideshare home, switch cars and end up in the wrong place with disastrous results. And that's just the first chapter. Tell us about the book.
Sure. So, like you said, it's about two women who switch places. We follow Sarah Bothery as she accidentally ends up at the other Sarah's house after the chance meeting at a bar. When she realizes her mistake, she walks home and she finds the other Sarah dead on her doorstep. That all happens in the first chapter, like you said. And I came up with this premise several years ago. I was waiting for an Uber or a Lyft or something like that outside of a bar, and there was a woman waiting for her rideshare across the road. Our cars came at the same time, and they happened to be similar looking cars. And on the ride home, I found myself wondering what would have happened if we switched places. Where would I be right now? And my imagination took hold, and that's where I got the idea for Are You Sara?
The true imagination of a thriller author, expecting what would be the worst thing that could happen, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, I actually never knew that I was going to write a thriller, honestly. I think what called to me when I was younger is writing and reading women's stories and about romance and about complicated family relationships. Now, I always loved thrillers. Would read 10 in the summer, every holiday, always buying them at the airport. And so I definitely knew that I loved the creativity and the intrigue of it, but I didn't know I had it in me until I coincidentally came up with a premise um, for one. And then when COVID hit in March 2020, I was working from home. I had some free time after work. I was ahead of schedule on my other book, and I just decided to play around and write Are You Sara? And it ended up working out really well. I ended up loving it. And so it really was an unexpected, wonderful thing that happened for me out of all of this was that I found a new passion.
Is this going to be a new career direction for you?
Possibly. I know I have at least one more thriller coming up. I was working on it this morning, actually. Um, and I would love to keep going because, the more I find myself thinking, like you said, what's the worst thing that could happen out of this? The more thriller ideas I have. I'm like, oh, what if I did this and that person ended up dead or that person disappeared? And it just keeps coming.
Well, the two Sarahs are both fascinating characters, and I understand that you perhaps drew on your own heritage and background for Sarah Baduri.
I did, yes. So one of the Sarahs is South Asian. She is the one that isn't killed, so she's the protagonist for the whole story, and she is the child of hardworking immigrants. She doesn't come from much, and although she sort of lets people perceive her as this good Indian girl who's hardworking, who's at law school, who's doing the right thing. She actually is an onion to be peeled, which you will do in the book, and you realize that she is anything but you expect. And the other Sarah is Sarah Ellis. She's the one who unfortunately is killed in the first chapter of the book. And she, you would think, has the perfect life. She's beautiful, she's rich, she has great friends, she's likable, she's smart, but she's absolutely damaged and has a lot of scars and really struggling and makes a lot of really, really bad choices in the months and years leading up to her death. Mm-hmm. And so I really loved being able to explore these two women who are very, very different, but ultimately it's about how they both try and break free of the expectations on them and their place in the world.
I think it's really interesting the way you played off the two characters, even though Sarah Ellis is dead. In the rest of the book, you go back into her background and how she became who she is. You alternate chapters pretty frequently, and that's pretty interesting. I really enjoyed reading more and delving more into her character. But you have some other really unusual characters in your book too. How about Jason? He's a very unusual character.
Yeah, so Jason is Sarah Bathory's boss. He is a white shoe law partner in Boston, and he is a silver fox. He is a hunk. He is a Suits type. I don't know if you've seen that show. I
Oh yes,
watched it a million years
boy
ago. Yeah,
is he ever.
yeah, that type. And so Sarah works for him, and I won't give away any spoilers, but their relationship is really really complicated because they are both very very smart, very cunning, very dominant, always like to be right. And it's sort of their relationship sort of really plays into the power dynamics that I get into frequently in the book, and these power dynamics between men and women, between people who have privilege and people who have nothing and no power, white people and people of color and minorities. So these contrasts are a really big theme in the book.
Well, and I think you were spot on with that too. And another character who was interesting to me was AJ. Tell us about him.
Sure. So AJ is Sarah's friend at law school. He is a good Indian boy to Sarah's perceived good Indian girl. And he's her friend, but he's in love with her, and he always has been. And sort of that relationship, sort of, so AJ sort of presents a fork in the road. So Sarah could choose one path where she marries a guy like him and she goes and be a lawyer, and then there's a wife and a mom and a good Indian woman. Or she can follow the other path, which is an unknown path. And so AJ really, again, is the other side of that contrast, and sort of really showcases, I think, shares the choices that Sarah has to make throughout the book.
And those choices are not easy choices too. And it's interesting to see, a lot of times we're told to, when we write, to write flawed characters. Well, you did. I mean, so, Sarah certainly is a flawed character, but flawed in a good way. She has good intentions, I think.
Right. Well, not always, but hopefully most of the
Most
time.
of
I
the
think
time.
that, yeah. I mean, she definitely loves her family, especially her sister. She wants to she wants to better their lives. She wants to better their future and give them more opportunities. Really, the her ambition to succeed and to bring her family with her really is at her core. At the same time, that she is a bit of an anti-hero in that she isn't always going to do things that we can root for, that we can condone and like. But despite the fact that Sarah is not perfect and she's very flawed and she's kind of bad actually sometimes, I did really like her, and I hope that readers do too. But if you don't, that's okay.
I liked her too. I liked her very much, even when she was doing things I didn't quite agree with, but I gave her the benefit of the doubt because overall I liked her. Tell us about your research for this story.
Sure. So, Are You Sara is set in contemporary Boston. I haven't lived in that city, so I definitely did a lot of Google searching and figuring out how that sort of whole world fits and how it would work. Also, I drew on from my own past, not only the sort of the South Asian background of Sarah, but also Sarah's in law school during the book. And I went to law school in another life. And so I could kind of draw on that sort of competitive, academic, sort of prestigious seeking world as well.
Mhm. And did you plot it out ahead of time or did you write organically?
I'm definitely a plotter. When I write romance and women's fiction books, I do know where I'm going. I mean, the happily ever after is a given, but also just I like to know ahead of time where I want my relationships to end up, where I want my character to end up. I find that allows me to be more creative because I don't have to make gut instinct decisions in the flow of it. Um, So in Are You Sara, I knew my plot well. I knew where I wanted my characters to be, and then I kind of, as I went through the outline, I figured everything else out as I went.
Yeah, you could probably make adjustments for the way things went.
Oh, for sure. There's lots of editing. Always lots of editing.
Have you always been a writer?
I have been. I mean, I'm one of those was one of those bookworms as a kid and an adult too. Creative writing classes always. I did try writing a few books when I was younger, and then I don't know what happened to them. They're on a hard drive somewhere. Different genres, all sorts of different themes. But the first time I seriously tried to write a book was a romance novel, and that was my first one under Sonya Lalli, The Matchmaker's List.
Mhm. And you've been quite successful at that. And so you're trying out this new creative version of yourself, but do you think you might go back to that too, or try to do both?
I think my goal is to be able to write both. Perhaps alternating. I'm not sure how it's going to play out, but that would be my dream. I find that with writing romance and women's fictions, I get to harness sort of the happy part of me, the part of me that likes love and family and things to be wrapped up nicely, and to sort of look at these complicated issues in the world, but also sort of have an optimistic lens. And for thrillers, I what I've noticed is I get to put on a pessimistic lens.
Yeah.
I think the fact that I wrote this during 2020 is probably obvious to people, at least to people who know me, because I'm usually a happy person. But Are You Sara can get into some dark stuff, and I think that represents some of the darker things that are happening in this
In
decade.
in
So
the world, yeah.
um, yeah, so I hope my thrillers will be able to be an outlet for that sort of pessimism that I sometimes feel.
Okay. What other authors have influenced you?
So just writing generally, I think Jhumpa Lahiri, she's a literary writer who wrote The Namesake and The Lowlands and a lot of other books.
Yeah,
A
I know
huge
her
South
work.
Asian. Oh yes, amazing writer.
Mhm.
Uh, I know so influential to so many South Asian creatives, and to so many people generally. And then more recently, I think with thriller writing, I definitely love like Ruth Ware's books, and I like Lisa Unger and Gillian Flynn, of course. I think a lot of there's a lot of really, really talented women writing psychological thrillers right now, and I just sort of I devour them.
I love them too. What other creative endeavors do you pursue?
Writing is my biggest creative endeavor. I'm not really a artist. I can't draw a
Mhm.
stick figure even. I think writing has been my biggest outlet. I played piano when I was younger, so I should really pick that back up as well.
Well, there you go. So you said you have another book in the works. Tell us about that. And we just have a little bit of time left, but
Mhm.
give us a brief overview.
Sure. So it's still very early days. I think I'm on chapter 3 right now, but essentially it's going to be a thriller that takes place at a destination South Asian wedding,
Mm,
and somebody dies.
well, I will have to hear more about that. And so, what would you like us to know going forward? What can you say to your potential readers?
I would just like to say thank you if you are reading any of my books. I really appreciate it. And for also, a lot of us readers are writers too. And so I would say that don't put yourself in a box or have these very narrow expectations of yourself, because, for me, I had no idea I would write a thriller, and it's really opened up a whole new world for me. So yeah, just go with the flow and be creative, and don't stop.
And now here you are. Well, thanks so much for being with us today, Sonia. This was a real pleasure. I enjoyed it, and I hope our readers will, and listen, and watchers, viewers will too. Where can we find you online?
I have my website, sclolly.com, or you can find me on Instagram at Sonya_Lolly.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us. And thanks again to our viewers, and look for us again soon on Authors on the Air. Thank you.